Hello and welcome wherever you may be on planet Argue Over Nothing. Last week I managed to slip in a few photos of Arundel. We had arrived there quite late, about 3:30, and the farmer's market was just wrapping up, and there was a big queue for some freshly baked almond croissants at a little cafe called Moat and Bailey, and we managed to get a couple of bits and then go and sit by the river, which was where the green rhinoceros came from last week. In Arundel, almost everyone is British, and it is a relief. This week the three readings are on the ancient rivers of initiation, on the descending octave, and one of the Paris meetings where Gurdjieff talks about the inside and the outside. The more a man studies the obstacles and deceptions which lie in wait for him at every step in this realm, the more convinced he becomes that it is impossible to travel the path of self-development on the chance instructions of chance people. At the same time, he gradually sees more clearly defined, first a feeble glimmer, then the clear light of truth which has illuminated mankind through the ages. The beginnings of the chain of initiation are lost in the darkness of time, where the long chain of epochs unfolds. Great cultures and civilizations loom up, dimly arising from cults and mysteries, ever changing, disappearing, and reappearing. What is called the great knowledge is handed on in succession from age to age, from people to people, from race to race. The great centers of initiation in India, Assyria, Egypt, Greece illumine the world with a brilliant light. The revered names of the great initiates, the living bearers of the truth, are handed on reverentially from generation to generation. Truth is fixed by means of symbolical writings and legends, and is transmitted to the mass of people for preservation in the form of customs and ceremonies, in oral traditions, in memorials, and sacred art through the invisible quality of dance, music, sculpture, and various rituals. It is communicated openly after a definite trial to those who seek it, and is preserved by oral transmission in the chain of those who know. After a certain time has elapsed, the centers of initiation die out one after another, and the ancient knowledge departs through underground channels into the deep, hiding from the eyes of seekers. The bearers of this knowledge also hide, becoming unknown to those around them, but they do not cease to exist. From time to time, separate streams break through to the surface, showing that somewhere deep down to the interior, even in our day, there flows the powerful ancient stream of true knowledge of being. To break through to this stream, to find it, this is the task and the aim of our search. It is rare to find somebody who can marry together practice and intellectual knowledge. That is very evident from people who study Gurdjieff's teaching. And it is also evident from all the philosophers and pseudo-spiritual people in Europe who had tried to revive the West after the beginning of the fading of their religion. They talked, but they did not practice, and that was their error. Or, alternatively, they practiced, but they did not think with a higher knowledge. On the earth today, it is globalized. That means it has become a kind of open terrain with no structures at all. And although people perhaps fret in the West or in Argentina or in different countries China and India, which are both ancient countries, have basically lost all their traditions and show very little interest in them. And adding to that Tibet and the mess that exists in the Abrahamic religions, you realize that we are in a period where the centers of initiation are dying out one after another, and it will not be easy to revive them, because to revive them means to revive a kind of magical, spiritual, holy light that would seem very strange to modern people who are so used to having confidence in their so-called science, which is a kind of hypnotic detachment from reality. There are not many people left on this planet who have the privilege of holding a spade in their hand and shoveling the manure from cows, and can smell the fresh air and understand life and feel life. Something that came up this week was the history of the colonial period in America, in particular a colony that existed on Roanoke Island, which is off North Carolina. And before the real initiation of British culture in America in Jamestown, there was a colony from 1587 in Roanoke Island, which was remote, and 13 years later when a ship visited it, everybody had vanished. Presumably they had died. What is interesting to me is that there were reports that the local Indians that the British had met were reported to have grey eyes, and that there had been a previous unknown European settlement that had happened sometime prior to that, in a history of Western civilization that is not really known. And there are two accounts about that, one from John Lawson and one from the Reverend John Blair. I'll just read them out. The Hatteras Indian who lived on Roanoke Island, or much frequented it, tell us that several of their ancestors were white people, and could talk in a book as we do, the truth of which is confirmed by grey eyes being found frequently amongst these Indians and no others. They value themselves extremely for their affinity to the English and are ready to do them all friendly offices. There is a nation of Indians called the Hatteras Indians who have ever since the first settlement of the English among them been very friendly, and they have a tradition among them that their ancestors were white people. As has been said already, the law of octaves in all its manifestations was known to ancient knowledge. Even our division of time, that is, the days of the week, into work days and Sundays, is connected with the same properties and inner conditions of our activity which depends upon the general law. The biblical myth of the creation of the world in 6 days, and of the 7th day in which God rested from his labours, is also an expression of the law of octaves, or an indication of it, though an incomplete one. Observations based on an understanding of the law of octaves show that vibrations may develop in different ways. In interrupted octaves, they merely begin and fall, are drowned or swallowed up by other stronger vibrations, which intersect or which go in opposite directions. In octaves which deviate from the original direction, the vibrations change their nature and give results opposite to those which might have been expected at the beginning. And it is only in octaves of a cosmic order, both descending and ascending, that vibrations develop in a consecutive and orderly way, following the same direction in which they started. A right and consistent development of octaves, although rare, can be observed in all the occasions of life, and in nature, and in every human activity. And the right development of these octaves is based on what looks an accident. It sometimes happens that octaves going parallel to the given octave, intersecting or meeting it, in some way or another fill up its intervals, and make it possible for the vibrations of the given octave to develop in freedom and without checks. It is established that if at the necessary moment, at the moment when the given octave passes through an interval, there enters into it an additional shock, which corresponds in its force and its character, the octave will develop further without hindrance along the original direction. In such cases there is an essential difference between ascending and descending octaves. In an ascending octave, the first interval comes between mi and fa. If a corresponding additional energy enters at this point, the octave will develop without hindrance all the way to C, but between C and Do it needs a much stronger additional shock for its right development. Because the vibrations of the octave at this point are of a considerably higher pitch. In a descending octave, the greatest interval occurs at the very beginning of the octave, immediately after the first Do, and the material for filling it is very often found either in Do itself, or in the lateral vibrations evoked by Do. For this reason, a descending octave develops much more easily than an ascending octave, and in passing beyond C it reaches Fa without hindrance. Here an additional shock is necessary, though considerably less strong than the first shock between Do and C. In the primary octave of the cosmos, flowing from the Absolute and reaching the sun, earth and moon, the Absolute is the Do of the octave. The worlds which the Absolute creates in itself are C. The interval between Do and C in this case is filled by the will of the Absolute. The process of creation is further developed by the force of the original impulse and an additional shock. C passes into La, which for us is our starry world, the Milky Way. La passes into Sol, our sun, the solar system. Sol passes into Fa, the planetary world, and here between the planetary world as a whole and our Earth occurs an interval. This means that the planetary radiations carrying various influences to the Earth are not able to reach it, or to speak more correctly, they are not received. The Earth reflects them. In order to fill the interval at this point of the ray of creation, a special apparatus is created for receiving and transmitting the influences coming from the planets. This apparatus is the organic life on the Earth. The organic life transmits to the Earth all the influences intended for it and makes possible the further development and growth of the Earth, of the cosmic octave, and then of the moon or ray, after which follows another Do, nothing. You know the prayer, Holy God, Holy Firm, Holy the Immortal. This prayer comes from an ancient knowledge. Holy God means the absolute or all. Holy the Firm also means the absolute or nothing. Holy the Immortal signifies that which is between them, that is, the 6 notes of the ray of creation with organic life. All 3 taken together make one. This is the coexistent and indivisible Trinity. I was just thinking this morning that fortune favors the brave. In Western culture, particularly revered courage or a great spirit above all because it seemed to have magical properties. So as an example, the founder of a company brings a pulse with him. He brings his passion and his spirit, and it creates a pulse that manifests itself into that company, and it travels along in waves. But what we see is that as the founders get older or die or are replaced, the company changes. It starts to decay or potentially move in a new direction. Of how octaves radiate in society. I was doing Tai Chi yesterday and I recognized suddenly that I was putting a lot of force in my body. And I moved my interior position so that the body was actually moving in an effortless way. In other words, I entered the astral body and was puppeting the body from a distance, weightlessly. And if that is done carefully, a strange slow motion synchronization occurs. And as Gurdjieff says, as the unity is completed in the planetary body, the astral body can command it from a distance. The next stage is to command it with your instincts. But after that, there is the sense of commanding it with pure will. In order for that to happen, you have to do a huge amount of work. And working on those higher bodies obviously comes after the long work of integrating the centers of the planetary incarnation. Human beings do not connect with themselves interiorly. They are very dependent on the world, of being liked on their video, which makes them feel good. And I would say that in general, the only way they connect with their body is by looking at it. They see their hand and they raise the flesh. Not many of them are actually embodying the moving center, especially in these days when they use their body in a limited fashion. I would like to clarify what I said. I have certain barriers in my life outside that stop me and that I had before the work and against which I struggled as best as I could. Today when I work, I tend to base my work on these barriers. I don't need to hear the end, I understand. Outwardly, you separate when you are not sure, where you cannot see. You have exactly the same barriers internally. You don't yet have the practice, the experience. Inside and outside the barriers are the same. When you are more, your experience having increased, the barriers will fall outwardly and inwardly. And like that, continue, until you have a real interior and a true exterior. Until the day you make the division between the two. You are on the right path today if you understand what I am saying. The exterior barriers are exactly the same as the interior barriers. A few things came together for me with that are very important. There was another passage where Gurdjieff had said that you should hold precepts both externally and internally. In other words, not lying, not stealing, not killing, and not just outward adherences. They are also inward. But I imagine that many people inwardly do whatever the hell they want. And Gurdjieff has said that you will only meet in the world certain people that correspond to your type, because you do not interact with the whole of human society. You interact with people who are on your wavelength or type length. That is a law. It seems when you're crossing the road that you're with everybody, but not really, because the world is full of psychic currents. And these motivate us, these are part of our own individual energetic makeup. We're all working according to our inner material, and the outer material that is perceptible to us is very closely related to the inner material, which is a great hope for us. My guru told me, trust me, you are divine. I used to sit for hours with nothing but the I am in my mind. And soon peace and joy and a deep all-embracing love became my normal state. In it all disappeared.
Внутри планеты